We need more ambition and scale out of UK Auto's international relationships with the EU and beyond. The biggest threat to our EV future right now is the threat of tariffs. We need the UK and EU working together to delay restrictive local content rules for the good of our electric transition.
The automotive sector and our ports are vital to the country and also to trade. Not only do we ship and transport all those finished cars, but also the components that go into the manufacturing process.
The UK now has the opportunity to introduce its own package of measures and incentives for businesses, and it should also look at making an increasingly agile, flexible and forward-thinking regulatory environment.
We're investing in the UK's future, taking big calls. Cost competitiveness is key, and we need government's absolute focus on this.
Ladies and gentlemen, international collaboration mentioned by the Secretary of State. We're going to drill down into it now. It's a real pleasure to be here with our panel. As you can see, it's hugely diverse, at least in terms of opinion, as you'll discover. Can I get you all to introduce yourselves? Actually, just from my far right, as it were, not politically necessarily, or possibly, and then bring us down.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Blundell, Marketing and PR Manager for BYD in the UK.
Hello, good morning. Yes, good morning, everyone.
Just about.
I'm Tim Slatter. I'm the chair of Ford of Britain. I'm also the Vehicle Programme Director for our global transit business.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Ballantyne, I'm Chief Executive of the British Ports Association, and we are a non-political organisation, so I'm very glad I'm in the centre, because that's exactly where I should be.
Well, for the time being, we might push you to the left or right.
Over on the left, so I'm Ben Gardner. I'm a lawyer from a firm called Pinsent. We do a lot of work in the automotive industry.
Right. Tim, kick us off. What are the challenges? The Secretary of State alluded to them, but didn't then go into a lot of detail about them. What are the challenges that government, that everyone ought to be facing when it comes to collaboration?
Well, I think the thing which is really at the front of our minds at the moment, Justin, is this rules of origin topic. And it relates to collaboration, of course, because it's all to do with international trade. You know, our most important trading relationship in our sector really is with the European Union. We have a trade and cooperation agreement, which is fabulous. You know, that was the result of the post-Brexit negotiations, and within that there is the rules of origin regulation, which was sort of architected 3 or 4 years ago. It comes into effect next year, and it means, without getting into all the technicalities, it means that a large proportion of battery electric vehicles must be produced either in the European Union or in the UK. And there's very specific regulations for the battery itself. And it's really difficult for the industry to meet those requirements within this time frame. It comes into effect in 2024, which is just a few months away. And really, once you dive into that, you know, we will be making eight electric vehicles in Europe for the European market, building the e-drives in the northwest in Halewood with our very large investment there. All of those batteries will be produced in Europe or in the UK, but they will still not meet the regulation, and that's because what matters is what goes inside the battery, and specifically the CAM, the cathode active material, which is about 50% of the value of the cell. And that then comes into sort of tier 2, tier 3 suppliers who need to produce that then in a big chemical plant, and that's just not ready. And so, you know, in conclusion, we really need to just adjust the time frame so that we don't tax the decarbonisation strategy.
So when you say adjust the time frame, push it back.
That's
what any government has to do. This government,
yes.
An incoming Labour government, were there to be such a thing. Is she gone? I feel like I'm quite frightened of it. Yeah, okay. And we're going to be hearing from Labour later on. Be interesting to know what their response is.
Yeah, I mean,
push back that time frame.
That's right.
And crucially, then, if you're a government minister, that means giving and taking. That means entering into a negotiation where we might have to do something. I just want to final point. I won't concentrate on you all the way through, Tim, but just where I got you on this. Do you believe, from the contacts you have behind the scenes, that there is a kind of realistic resting place where this gets to that the industry can live with?
I think there is. And, you know, if you asked me, well, Tim, how far do you have to push it back? And we think you know, if you want to kind of do it once and not have to think about it again, it's probably 2027, which will give us enough time to get all of those supply chains in place. Right. And do I think that there's a willingness to do it? Yes, I think, you know, we've been talking to UK government for a while about this. There's no doubt that the UK government now have this, you know, firmly in the sort of centre of their agenda, but it's a bilateral trade agreement, so we need Brussels to agree to any changes as well. And I think there can be an agreement because, you know, our counterparts in the European Union, the German manufacturers, for example, are not going to like the idea of, you know, paying tariffs as they import vehicles into the UK either.
Anyone else with a specific point on this before we go on to other things?
No, I'll just add, Justin, I think now is the time that government are listening about the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and SMMT and ourselves and one or two others are on one of the advisory groupings. But it's hard work to convince officials that it's time to start proposing something that effectively the Daily Mail could say, well, we're giving in, or etc. So, but now is the time to push that point, I think, from a trade point of view. Yeah.
Do you have hope? I know you absolutely said you're not political. Of course you're not. And in all seriousness, you're none of you going to enter into politics on this. But you know, if we were to have a Labour government that was friendlier towards the European Union and wanted to be and could withstand the Daily Mail if that's what it took, is that something that you would encourage them to look at now and think about now?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite complicated. I wouldn't get involved in sort of a motor kind of arrangements, so don't worry, I'm not going to kind of start commenting on behalf of most of the people in this audience, the Labour Party. The politicians and the opposition members they're being quite guarded. They're keeping their powder dry. They don't want to push anything publicly yet, but there is a lot of sympathy towards, you know, greater alignment on various things that might be sort of not too politically sensitive and also sensible for the economy.
Yeah. Okay, Ben, other thoughts on international collaboration, the challenges, the places that everyone ought to be focusing?
Well, I think just to follow on from Richard and Tim, really, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement was agreed a number of years ago, and look how much the world has changed since then. We've had a pandemic, we've had a war, there's been any number of issues and external factors that are affecting the roadmap that we agreed 2-3+ years ago. So I think we need some collective common sense between the UK and Europe just to admit, look, things have moved on, and for our collective good and our ongoing collaboration, we do need to agree a suitable middle ground and some reasonable deadlines for meeting these targets.
And with your expertise, do you see that happening? And again, what you know behind the scenes, do you sense that we are moving in that direction? Because that's what people in the room want to know about, isn't it? What the direction of travel seems to be.
It's a great question, and I think, to be honest, the problem with a lot of the Brexit agreements is that it's kind of a vote by committee, and all you need is one difficult player and the whole kind of house of cards could fall down. So I think that there does seem to be positive rumblings coming out of Brussels, and the European Car Makers Association similarly want to push the kind of targets and the deadlines back, but all it takes is one kind of fly in the ointment and we find ourselves stuck in a real kind of difficult situation.
Yeah. Mark, from your perspective, which is a very different perspective in the sense of bringing stuff into Europe and bringing stuff into the UK, where do you come from when it comes to international collaboration and the things that might ease?
Well, I think it's clearly really important, and I think the point I'd just like to add about the politics is I think for the UK we should just have a consistent roadmap, regardless of which party's in charge. It would certainly help the industry if we had a clarity of what does the next 10 years look like, regardless of political persuasions. Mm-hmm. From a BYD perspective, we're acutely aware we're really new to the UK. We started in March of this year, so we only have some sort of very early initial observations, which actually backed into the keynote speech we've just heard. There's labour issues that we're struggling with. There's capacity on ro-ro vessels to get the vehicles across in time. So, from our perspective, we're working through those nuts and bolts operational issues at the moment just to iron those out. But I think moving forward, we need to make it as easy as possible to electrify the UK marketplace.
What about the wider kind of political picture? And I'm talking very wide now, globally, when it comes to what Chris Giles was saying, we look at it as de-risking rather than decoupling, but obviously with China, with international trade generally, with the idea of manufacturing closer to home, presumably one of the things you're intending to do presumably is manufacture close to the places where you're actually.
Yeah, I mean,
can you give us an insight into how you see that picture?
Yeah, it's very early stages for us, but there are studies taking place. Clearly, Europe is a very important marketplace for BYD. The UK is one of those key markets within the G5, and certainly it's our intention moving forward that we'll have a manufacturing base closer to the markets in the European area rather than relying on the routes from China all the time.
Right. I should say we'll have plenty of time for questions when we've had our discussion. So if people have got things they want to ask individuals or more broadly, have them up your sleeve. Let's talk about ports and customs, which have come up a couple of times so far. I mean, again, it sort of runs into politics, doesn't it? And the Daily Mail, which you brought up, and the idea that these things can be derailed. But what needs to happen in our ports over the next decade?
And just say I've got no problem with the Daily Mail in case they're here.
I occasionally write for them.
I think look, firstly, I would say the basic stuff I should have said at the top of this session is you, as the automotive sector, you are vitally important to ports. You may not know this, but you are effectively our number one trade, whether that's finished cars or that's components, things in the supply chain, etc. And you're also very important because we don't actually export that much in the UK, and you are a big exporter. So we need a healthy vehicle sector and a manufacturing sector, etc. So thank you for what you do. The other two sectors that are quite important, slightly amusing, it's whiskey, that's a good export, and fish, that's another great export of ours. But generally, I think you do a lot more. It's high value, it's also heavy, so that's good for those in the shipping sector because that's how we make some of our money. And you have gone through quite a lot of challenging periods. I mean, we've all had the pandemic, but you've all had to get through getting used to new trading arrangements with customs. And at a very generalist...
Stop you. That's really interesting. Well, as cars get heavier, which we know they are with the EVs and stuff, does that mean you make more money out of each car?
Let's move on, Justin. Let's move on to the next question.
Moving swiftly on. Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
So, I mean, effectively, when I was talking to some colleagues in the customs sector recently, there was a big logistics show in the Midlands, and we effectively reflected on what's gone on with the HMRC and everything. And somebody said to me, they've got away with it, haven't they, with Brexit? And I don't like to use that word, got away with it. We have made it work. And I say we, both government and industry, we've made it work. Now, we haven't had all the border controls coming in. So we'll have the phytosanitary controls coming, which will be of passing interest to people in this room, not as direct as, say, for example, the Fresh Produce Association, who've been in the news lately. But there are more things to deal with, more stoppages, more costs, etc. But in terms of customs, we have modified and developed systems, both for ro-ro ports like Dover and the Channel Tunnel, where we have a new system, but also the conventional processes which a lot of people in this room would now be familiar with. We've made it work. So it hasn't stopped everyone, and it hasn't caused as many frictions at the borders as we would expect. That doesn't mean that there hasn't been a cost, and I would imagine a lot of people in this room would now have to go through sort of quite bureaucratic processes with either themselves or agents, representatives around customs declarations and formulas. And that is not good for trade, because obviously that makes us less competitive.
What's Ford's view of the ports and the borders and customs procedures in the next?
Yeah, I mean,
nice,
I think, start by saying, like, the automotive industry globally is one massive collaboration machine. At Ford we have a technical centre in the UK where we develop all the fantastic transits. We build them in Turkey. We build e-drives in the northwest in Halewood. We import Mustang Mach-E's from Mexico. We have a pilot plant in Germany. German product development colleagues, and so there's this network that's continuously interacting, and it is vital that friction at the border, is reduced as much as possible. That tariffs are eliminated. Whether it's just me travelling to continental Europe for a meeting, I now have to queue up in the all other passports queue, which just takes longer. I have to build more time into my day to allow for all of that, and that's just a small thing. But then, if I want to bring a prototype vehicle across from continental Europe, it now requires an awful lot of paperwork.
I've just been through that pain.
Yeah, and in fact, it was at the last big sort of team event we did in Dunton, we couldn't get the new Explorer there in time to show the team because it was stuck at the border. just because of some paperwork. And of course, you know, these things can be worked through, but you know, like my colleague here said, we can make it work. We are making it work, but let's just try to make it work more seamlessly.
Yeah.
And you know, industry's prepared to you know, work with government to make sure that this can be you know, fully compliant with all the intentions of Brexit, but just also you know, compliant with a successful automotive sector.
Are we getting there in any way? Does anyone think? I mean, that's a very good elucidation of the potential problems and the you know, two really good examples of things that are barriers to the easy doing of trade. But are we? Is there an understanding ministerially, or is there an understanding? Do you sense a kind of sense of optimism that actually these are things that everyone agrees have to be gripped, or is there a kind of sense of we don't know what to do?
I think, you know, we're kind of still in startup mode in BYD, so we're trying to discover what good looks like to a certain extent. The sense is that it's settling in and it's getting easier, and some of that will be our own staff knowledge and understanding of the processes, and then also the other side of the coin will be the partners we work with understanding how BYD works as well. So when I put the survey out into the company, the feedback was, yes, it's been a bit of a challenge, but it's getting better, and there's optimism that things will settle down, and we'll see a much smoother flow of vehicles into the UK for us.
Yeah. Ben, give us a kind of sense of the challenge of electrification when it comes to inward investment in particular. What should people be looking at?
I think a key challenge, as has been mentioned a few times today, is us potentially being caught in a no man's land between the Inflation Reduction Act and the EU's Green Deal. Similar to semiconductors, the UK seems to be quite reactive in its response to things that are happening in the market. You've got the US followed by the EU, and then the UK kind of trailing behind. And I think with the IRA and the Green Deal, we need to really try and accelerate our response to that and try and be as entrepreneurial as we can.
Drilling down on that, what is that entrepreneurial response? Because everyone has said, I mean, Chris Giles was saying earlier, and Kemi Badenoch was saying, wasn't she, that there isn't going to be a kind of a response on that scale. There can't be a response on that scale. And I'm not sure that this government, well, they don't have an industrial policy, and they don't like the term. But is that the direction we've got to go in? We should go in? Who's got a view? Well, you're nodding, but
yeah. Well, I think that would certainly attract some inward investment, or at least make us look like we have a plan. We've had kind of some optical issues following kind of the Truss premiership and other issues around Brexit and things that maybe make the UK look potentially unattractive compared with other more stable nations. But there's also a huge amount to be positive about. We've got world-class universities, we've got industrial heritage, we've got a great tech and cyber scene, and we've got the English language in a really, really stable legal system. There's lots to attract businesses to come here. We just need maybe some headline policy points or cherries to be dangled that really kind of helps to turn the screw on. Yeah, we're going to choose the UK. We're not going to go to Germany, France, or wherever else it might be.
It's quite striking that we have to tell ourselves those things, isn't it? We used to sort of assume them when I was a nipper, but now we do tell ourselves, and they are, of course, true, and particularly the legal system, I guess. Anyone else with a thought on where the direction we should?
Yeah, look, I think that's right. I think the industry is a strong industry on all the things that you said about, you know, all the kind of feeder mechanisms of great universities and good skills, and you know, you can't actually take those things for granted. And I think one of the things that industry is going through at the moment is a realization that all those technical skills that we sort of did take for granted that now need to evolve to the new challenges of electrification, software, and all the kind of new stuff. That actually reskilling people is a really important part of that. We're doing a lot of that at Ford, leveraging the the schemes to government sort of funded schemes to reskill people, and that's working very well. And I guess I just think that I agree. The government doesn't need to put billions and billions and billions of pounds on the table, but they do need to make sure that there are, you know, some certainty. That investment in Halewood requires us to believe that there's going to be tariff-free trade with the European Union for a long time. And so investments like that, depend upon, the UK being a reliable investment place. And so that does require stability and sort of long-term certainty.
Yeah. Let me throw it open to anyone who wants to ask any question of anyone, because as we suspected, they do have a diversity of view, if not other things. And we've got microphones and people who are willing to go from person to person. While you're thinking of what those questions might be, batteries, we ought to mention specifically batteries when it comes to international collaboration, etc. Where are we? Where are we with batteries? Where do we need to be?
Well, from a BYD perspective, we're very collaborative. We already have agreements with other OEMs that we supply our battery technology to. So as well as being an automotive brand, we're the second largest battery manufacturer in the world. So, it's very much in our ethos to share that technology and make sure we spread that, best practice across viable partners for us. So,
how viable can anything be here without a kind of battery infrastructure in this country? Ben?
Well, I think it's one of the fundamental pillars of the future of automotive. You're going to have autonomous, connected electric vehicles, and the UK, we've got, as I said, a good tech scene. We've got a good industrial automotive heritage. An EV is going to be an absolutely fundamental part of kind of automotive 2.0, or whatever we want to call it. So we need to make sure that we've got the relevant incentives, the correct regulatory environment, and all of the things that we need to make that industry flourish.
Yeah, and when it comes to the incentives and the other things it needs to make it flourish, how close are we to getting all of those things? Do we think from Ford's perspective?
Well, I think we're on the right track, but as I said earlier, there's a lot of the infrastructure sort of further up the supply chain that really needs to be put in place. I mean, a battery cell factory is a massive investment. It's about $5 billion, employs several thousand people, thousands of pieces of equipment. I mean, it's a really big deal. But behind that needs to be, lots of chemical production and facilities and supply chains that can support that. And so, making sure that that's all in place and is reliable as you scale up is absolutely critical here.
But the point being, the role of government in that is obvious, isn't it?
Yes.
And is huge. And no government of whatever political stripe can ignore that.
No, that's right. And it's important to make sure the UK gets a good share of that investment of this new wave of technology. Because it really is a sort of multi-generational thing. We're switching to electric vehicles. And that will probably be it largely, perhaps hydrogen as well in the longer term. But this is it.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, gentleman, right in the middle there. Hold on 1 second, because the microphone will come to you so that everyone can hear you. Here we go.
Hello, Richard Amenagama from Mikos Technologies. Question I have is about investment. Is which countries in the world are looking to invest in UK automotive sector the most, and is that changing? And conversely, where are UK companies looking to invest externally?
There we are. Who wants to come here? Where do people want to go from here? Ben, is that something for you to kick off on?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know if I've got the answer to it. I mean, within our world, we're acting for a lot of international companies that are looking at and weighing up the different pros and cons of different countries to kind of establish their European HQ. So we're acting with Chinese and US OEMs and helping them to kind of work out, well, what's got the most favourable kind of tax incentives, what's got the most favourable regulatory environment. And the UK is scoring well against its European and more international counterparts. But yeah, I don't think I've really answered the question there.
That's fine.
Yeah, and
You're not meant to say that. That's my job.
So the guy who's the kind of non-expert from this sector is not going to answer the question either. But I would say one thing, without sort of naming individual companies, when the government developed its Freeport strategy, automotive was definitely on the radar. That was one of the sectors that government wanted to woo and to encourage to come in for that inward investment. Not just talking about manufacturing cars, but also the supply chain element. So that is there as in a tool and a lever. We've got investment zones coming. Whether or not they do enough to attract these investors, I think remains to be seen, though.
Okay. it's the car manufacturers must now weigh in.
Yeah,
Well, you're obviously, I mean, you're coming here in the sense
we're
of
kind
cars
of like
are, but are you coming here in a bigger sense?
Yeah, we're almost like a live example. You know, we've chosen the UK as a place to set up as a national sales company. So rather than, you know, in other markets where it's via a dealer and an import arrangement, we're a national sales company. So it's not necessarily the traditional infrastructure manufacturing, but we are setting up a head office, we're recruiting staff, we're going to be investing in media, we're going to be investing in showrooms and, you know, across the country. So there's an investment from our perspective, and the UK is a very important market for BYD, and our intention is, you know, we're seeing it as a very long-term, you know, place to be. So, yeah, we're almost like a live example of a business that's decided to come into the UK as a key market for us.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked a lot about Halewood before, but you know, it's an important thing. It's £350 million. It's repurposing a factory that builds manual transmissions to one that builds e-drives. It'll be building 600,000 e-drives by 2026. That's about a third of the number of e-drives that we'll need in Europe. And there's potential for more investment there, and the company looks at an investment like that incredibly seriously. You know, it's thick end of $500 million. It's not something which is taken lightly at all. But the fact that Ford made that investment, I think, proves that inward investment in the right conditions into the UK is still attractive in the right conditions.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else with a question? Yes, right down here. Hold on 1 second. We'll get the microphone to you. If you come forward. Here we go. And then in. Thank you.
Thank you. You've spoken up there about the need to push back the rules of origin requirements under the TCA till 2027. And I'm sure everybody in this room would like that to happen. But do you honestly believe that the European Union is going to agree to that?
Yeah,
I don't mind.
That's the question, really, isn't it? And what might have to be given in order to get them to agree?
Yeah,
From the context you have in Europe, is it seen as realistic? And you're all dotting to and from, and obviously Ford is. What's the kind of sense of in the Commission more widely in Europe, the thought that actually on this issue it would be wrong to press ahead and keep it as it is?
Look, I'm not going to try and prejudge what may have to be traded. I mean, there is a view that the UK is more impacted by this than the European Union. But, you know, the UK is a major market for luxury German manufacturers, for example. And I am confident in terms of what I know that there is a lot of lobbying happening, not just from our side, but from the European side and European manufacturers. And so, look, I think there's a good chance that this will be agreed. There's certainly no guarantee, and it's vital that we try and get the agreement quickly because, you know, 2024 in production scheduling terms is very, very close, and you know, adjustments will have to be made. I mean, look, if we add a 10% tax, you know, it's likely that will flow through to some extent to pricing, and everyone in this room who knows anything about marketing knows if you put the price up, the volume goes down, and you know, that's the situation that we're going to face. And you know, like I've said a number of times, you know, the bizarre thing is we won't be taxing ICE and hybrid vehicles. We will be taxing, you know, the next generation BEV vehicles, which is certainly not what was intended when this regulation was put in place several years ago.
Yeah. Ben, are there enough pressures within Europe, do you think, to make this happen? So in other words, it's not just a matter of Britain giving something in return. It's actually there will be forces in Europe that say, actually, this is good for us as well.
I think certainly, as Tim said, that the UK is a really key market for European automotive as well. So there needs to be some reciprocity there, and this will probably not be the final bump in the road as we start to really get into the weeds of the trade agreement. There will be other areas where there is ambiguity, a lack of clarity, and not meeting of the minds as to how a particular rule or provision is construed, thinking about things like type approval. There will be inevitably instances where we need to come back to the table again. So hopefully the ROO situation kind of helps us to begin to collaborate and navigate our way towards a more meaningful, albeit separate, trading relationship.
Do you think that more widely that is a kind of understood thing now, that actually collaboration is a good thing? We don't want to impoverish ourselves and other people as well, and that kind of right across the board. Is it too optimistic to say that the title of this panel, International Cooperation, is a kind of sense that collaboration is something that drives people and drives the politicians? Or are we in a world where we're all kind of much more sealed off from each other than we once were?
I sense it's gradually improving. I think, not wanting to politicise this at all, but I think that, as sort of things like rules of origin come up and become, sort of factual things that you can talk about and not hypothetical scenarios, it's kind of just, I think, bringing into focus how, this could go either way, and let's be, just a bit practical about how to support things and make sure that we have a vibrant industry.
Richard?
Yeah, very briefly, because it says, if you don't know, it says wrap it up on the screen here, which is quite a daunting thing to see, but anyway, we won't go into all the secrets.
Been saying that for half an hour. It's just what they think.
Touche. Anyway, no, well, I'll just say, yeah, collaboration, I think, definitely is happening. But I think in a market-led sector like automotive and other sectors like the sort of trading and logistics industries are heavily linked to, I think the default is always competition, market-led, but there has been examples and circumstances where collaboration is definitely happening. But it's, as I say, we always tend to go back to what we know.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, they've been so interesting, they've crashed the pips. Thank you very much to our panel. A round of applause for them, please. Thanks for that.